What up, guys? Welcome to this episode of the Speaking Heat podcast, man. We're about to jump into some preview of the opening week of the college football season. I am solo today, but I'm going to dive into some more in-depth look at this week's games. It's gonna be very interesting. We got some good games that we're gonna preview. We're gonna start off with some games happening on Friday night and move into actual week one. Week one this Saturday, man. Hopefully it's gonna be a good weekend, and I'm excited for the beginning of the college football season. And let's jump right into it, man. I got some games pulled up here, and I just want to kind of just go through kind of how I'm looking at these games and see where I think this game's going to go, what this game means, a little bit of some insight looking at this game, and we'll see what we got, man. I'm excited. I'm excited for the beginning of the season, and I'm excited for this long season. And it goes by quick, but we're here. It's been a long time, so let's uh let's jump into it right now, man. First of all, basically what I'm going to do, I'm just going to, there's a handful of games I think that are key this week. There's, like a lot of college football weeks, there's going to be a lot of cupcake games and stuff. And basically, all I'm really looking at is the games this weekend that I think mean the most this weekend and games that I feel like should be the most attention paid on. And games that I feel like is kind of telling on where certain teams and how the season is going to play out. So, first game here I really want to look at is Auburn. This is actually Auburn versus Baylor. This is actually Friday night. This is going to kick off the weekend, right? Auburn and Baylor. They're playing in Waco, so Auburn is going to be on the road. Both of these teams, honestly, both of these teams really need a victory. We felt like Baylor a couple years ago with Dave Aranda was really moving in a good direction, and then it just seemed like they just kind of halted. They had that run where they almost won the Big 12 a couple years back, and then they just kind of fell apart. Auburn trying to see where they're going. They're kind of at a stage where they're kind of flatlining in mediocrity, and I feel like that they're a team that really needs a win because they need to start showing some improvement over the last couple of years because Auburn's not been very good. So they've really not been good in a couple of years. So they need this win to really kickstart something to get, back relevant in the SEC. And Baylor, kind of the same thing. We kind of thought Baylor was going in a good direction, and then they fell apart last year. But I think it's a big game. I think it's an entertaining game. I'm excited to see how this game plays out. I originally, when I started looking at the games, this season, I kind of thought Baylor was really going to take care of Auburn in this game. But in my opinion, I actually think just looking at things and, just kind of, informing myself on the game, I think Auburn actually pulls this game out. Quarterback Sawyer Robertson had a breakout year last year. We saw him really, really improve. So it kind of shed a little bit of light in where Baylor could go. And it kind of gives Baylor a little bit of hope in where they can take this season. So hopefully Sawyer Robertson can continue to have a good career at Baylor, and hopefully he can start getting Baylor back in the question of the Big 12. But Jackson Arnold, new quarterback at Auburn. Remember, he transferred from Oklahoma. He was benched last year. There was really high hopes for him because he was looked at as maybe that next Oklahoma quarterback to really continue, that string of having really, really good quarterback play. We'll see. I think he'll be pretty good at Auburn, in my opinion. So I'm excited to see how that works out. Really, just looking at the game, basically two things, or really one thing mainly. I think I'm excited to see what Auburn's offense is going to do against Baylor secondary. Baylor secondary struggled last year, and I think that's really the area where they need to really improve, especially on the defensive side of the football. I think Baylor in their secondary, moving some pieces around, hopefully can kind of get that defense back on track with Dave Aranda being the defensive guy. Hopefully they can kind of get that defense back where they want it so they can start really marching at challenging, the top end of the Big 12. And Auburn's actually got a really good crew of wide receivers. And I think Jack and Arnold should be able to use those wide receivers effectively and win some football games. And I think that's kind of what propels them in this game. I think Auburn wins this game. It looks like Baylor is actually a 2.5 point dog at home. So Vegas really thinks Auburn, honestly, is probably going to win this football game. Usually, if you see a road team as the favorite, usually that's telling with what Vegas usually shows because generally, betting speaking, if you're a home team, you usually are looking at 3 points just from being at home. So that's telling that they're a dog at home in Waco. So I think Auburn wins. I think Vegas think Auburn wins. I think they get the dub. And hopefully Auburn can kind of have a good season and kind of, have another team kind of approach that mid-level in the SEC to kind of start building and overall just making the SEC better, making college football better with more good teams. So I'm excited to see that one. The next game I really want to jump into, also that Friday night, so also happening at the same time, Georgia Tech and Colorado. I'm excited for this one. I think Georgia Tech's going to be a good football team. We get to see the post Shador and Travis Hunter era of Colorado. Obviously, Shador is now with the Cleveland Browns, and Travis Hunter, Heisman, one of the greatest players in the history of college football, to be honest, former Heisman. We'll see what they're going to be after those guys have moved on to the next level. We're going to see Dion on the sideline after dealing with bladder cancer in the offseason. But he says he will be back and he's ready to be on the sideline for Colorado. And really looking at Colorado, maybe the biggest question for them is what are they going to be at quarterback? They just had Shador. Sure, set tons of records at Colorado. So we're really going to see what they're going to be, at quarterback. They've got Caden Salter from Liberty, who actually was a really good quarterback at Liberty. He was 20-4 as a starter in 4 years. So he had good play at Liberty, but he's not playing at Liberty anymore. He's playing in Power Four conference against Power Four teams. So we'll see how he can do against Big 12 competition. But I'm excited to see this game. I'm excited to see what he's going to end up being, for Colorado and where they can go. And they've even got a young guy, one of the better recruits coming out of college at the quarterback position, backing him up. So we'll see how that quarterback room evolves as the season goes on. But when we're talking quarterbacks in this game, obviously the name to see is really Haynes King. Haynes King had a really, really good year last year. Dude was fun to watch, crazy fun to watch. He was a dog. He went out in every game. He was taking hits, but he was battling. He went out and had a crazy good year. I'm excited to see what he's going to do this year. I think he offensively is what's really going to propel Georgia Tech. So I really think they're going to be good on offense this year. I think they'll improve from last year. Remember last year they had like a rocky season. I feel like they were kind of figuring it out. They were really figuring out their season last year. They went 7-6 last year, but they ended the year on maybe the best high note of any team in the entire country. That multiple overtime game against Georgia. I remember watching that game, just being excited yet nervous, just watching that game play out. They went toe to toe with a essentially, a college football playoff team, a national championship contender, and they go toe to toe in Athens, where it comes down to the last play of the game where Georgia punches into the end zone for a win. But we saw that Georgia Tech team really, really, really put themselves on the map, and I think this year Georgia Tech, is going to be a top 20 team by the end of it. I think they're really going to show how good they are. I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia Tech beats a team or two that you may say they shouldn't win. But I really think that they're going to be really, really good this year. The next game I want to dive into a little bit is not necessarily the matchup itself, but I think what comes out of the matchup is what's interesting. We got Alabama going on the road, playing Florida State. They're going to be in Doak Campbell. They're going to be fired up down there. So, seeing Alabama play on the road in a hostile environment is going to be very, very exciting. But seeing what they're going to do if they're going to rebound from last year. Remember, Kalen DeBoer's second year after Nick Saban retires. They went 9-4. That's the most losses that Alabama's had since Nick Saban was the coach there at Alabama. So, seeing where they kind of leap towards after kind of a up and down year. There was times that Alabama looked like one of the best teams in the country, and then there was times that they just looked unorganized. They looked like they weren't as prepared as they should be. And I think this year, now having a year under his belt, I think Kalen DeBoer, I like to see where he gets this team, how refined he can get this team. He's gonna be breaking in a new quarterback. Obviously Ty Simpson is his first start at Alabama. He's been there for a couple years. We're gonna see. We're gonna see what he does. I'm excited to see what he's gonna be. He's kind of just been sitting there waiting, and I'm excited to see how far he's going to be able to take this Alabama team. Because in my opinion, I think he's going to be the key on how far Alabama can really go and how good they're really going to be. But I say that rumors that I've heard, that Bama's actually going to try to run the football more. They're going to try to establish a ground and pound game, maybe like they used to. Kind of like the trend that you've seen with Alabama over the last 2 years is they just don't run the ball as effectively as they used to. They've had great, great backs over the last 15, 20 years. And over the last couple of years, their running game has slowly dipped, partially because they have such electrifying quarterback play that I feel like the identity of this team offensively has kind of become more of a finesse football team. And so I think really seeing them try to establish a run game, because they have elite level offensive linemen. They've got dudes all over the place. So I want to see if they can start running the football again, because that's really going to be what establishes what tier Alabama's going to be in. If they can run the football, and they can run the football against, the best of the best, then that's a team that you got to worry about, because then you can take the pressure off of a new quarterback, Ty Simpson. So that's going to be like hand in hand in developing him and helping him develop the offense and find an identity and see how good they can really be. On the other side, Florida State, they're coming back from a terrible, terrible 2-win season. 2 years ago, they made a run where they almost made the college football playoff, had an undefeated season, quarterback goes down, they just get left out, and then they just kind of fell apart last year. In my opinion, I think Florida State will rebound to a degree. They're breaking in a new quarterback this year, so it's hard to say what they're really going to be. They're kind of a wait and see. But I think this game really is going to determine what is Florida State. Are they just going to kind of lie down and just kind of be the Florida State of last year and just essentially get pummeled? Or are they going to be a team that's going to fight and challenge this Alabama team Alabama's looking at the college football playoff. Florida State is not necessarily looking at the college football playoff, but there are guys on this team that once were looking at a college football playoff, were once looking at a national championship 2 years ago. So I want to see how much fight comes out of Florida State. And if they can really make this a game, they're playing at home, they should be fired up. They're playing against one of the greatest programs of all time. I'm excited to see this game. I really want to see how well this game turns out to be. I think it's going to be pretty close in the first half. I think there's a chance that Bama may run away with this game at the end. Um, I think there's a chance both defenses actually play pretty well. But I think Bama wins this football game, but I'm excited to see how this game rolls on. Next, let's dive into LSU, number 9 team in the country, going to Death Valley and playing Clemson. This is a logo game right here. This is like two of the big dogs in modern college football. We're talking two top 10 teams, both lay claim to having the real Death Valley. And seeing this LSU team go on the road in a hostile environment at night. This is going to be the nightcap. So I'm excited to see how this plays out. Going into this game, Clemson's a 3.5 point favorite, which they should be. I feel like they should be the favorite. I'm just playing at home. And I think them having so much returning production coming back, I think it really puts them in front in this game. But I mean, really, this game's going to really come down to the quarterback battle. We have two Heisman candidate quarterbacks in Cade Klubnik and Gus Nussmeier. Um, I think this is going to be an incredible game. I cannot wait for this game. In some ways, I am actually more excited about this game than the Texas Ohio State game. I think these are two of the best quarterbacks in the country. In my opinion, I think Cade Klubnik is maybe the best quarterback in the country. I'm not as high on Garrett Nussmeier as most are, but I still think he's a really good quarterback. But I'm excited to see how well he plays in this football game because playing on the road at night in Death Valley and Clemson against a really good football team, against a really good defense and a loaded defensive line, I'm excited to see what Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers do on the road. We got two major coaches, two major programs, two major quarterbacks. I mean, this is what college football was made for. So I'm excited to see this. Looking into this game. The first thing that I really look at is behind those quarterbacks. We have an experienced Clemson team. Clemson's bringing back 16 starters from a year ago. So I think bringing back that production, bringing back that familiarity with the system, with the play calling, the players, the camaraderie. I just think having a mature football team helps you a lot in all sports, and especially football. But on the other side, LSU, they're kind of reloading. They hit the transfer portal pretty well, especially in their secondary. They're reloading with 15 new starters. So we are yet to see what they're really going to be. Especially on defense, I'm interested to see how their secondary plays against Cade Klubnik. They really hit the transfer portal hard in the secondary. So we'll see how well they can improve their defense because their defense gave up a lot through the air last year. That was really the weakness of their football team, in my opinion. So I'm excited to see what this Cade Klubnik offense is going to do against LSU secondary. I think it's going to be very, very, very interesting. Night game. I mean, this is what college football was made for. This is what Saturday night was made for right here. So I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to this game. I'm actually looking forward to this game more than any game this weekend, in my opinion. And then let's jump into the big game of the weekend. This is the matchup everyone's talking about. Everyone's looking forward to. Texas, the number 1 team in the country, goes on the road against the reigning national champions, the Ohio State Buckeyes. This is the second time that 2 top 3 teams play in an opener. So this is rare air that we're experiencing right now. So this is a big matchup, and I'm really excited to see this. This is a rematch of last year's semifinal. Remember, Ohio State defeated Texas 28-14 in that incredible game. Really, what I look at when I look at these two teams is I don't want to say uncertainty, but it's these two teams are very different than they were last year. A lot of guys went to the NFL that played on these two teams last year. 14 Ohio State starters, 12 Texas starters, all went to the NFL. So they've got a lot of holes to plug. Both teams hit the transfer portal. Both teams have guys stepping up that were reserves last year and are now becoming starters and are now experienced players. So there's a lot to see on where these two teams are going to be, and especially at quarterback. Both teams are replacing their starting quarterbacks from last year. Obviously, everyone knows Arch Manning is going to be the starter at Texas. Big name. Obviously, he's a Manning. He has a ton of hype going into this game all offseason. I mean, really, since he got at Texas, even behind Quinn Ewers, it's been Arch. It's really everyone's waiting to see what he's going to be, and I am too. Everyone's waiting to see what Arch is going to be. Is he going to be the next great Manning? And he's going to be able to lead Texas back to the playoff and potentially to a national championship. And he's going against Julian Sand, unproven guy, just like Arch, but even more unproven. Never started a game in college. So we're really going to see what Julian Sand's going to be. And this is a way to kick it off, honestly, playing the best of the best and replacing the lineage of quarterbacks that you've seen at Ohio State year after year after year. That's pressure. We've not seen bad quarterback play at Ohio State in a long time. It seems like, when it comes to quarterbacks, they produce the best quarterbacks, it seems like, just from a year-to-year perspective. They've had so many great quarterbacks there, and he's in position to be the next great. And he's a highly touted freshman, redshirt freshman, I believe. So we're really going to see what he's going to be. I'm excited to see what he's going to end up being. I'm excited to see how this offense develops around him. I trust Ryan Day. If there's going to be any coach in any system in the country that I trust to develop a quarterback and get a quarterback ready to play the best of the best, it's going to be Ryan Day and the Ohio State Buckeyes. They usually get their quarterbacks up to speed pretty well, and by the end of the season, they're raring to go and in prime form. So I'm excited to see what he's going to end up being. It looks like Ohio State is a 1.5-point favorite, so it's essentially a pick 'em. It's essentially a pick 'em game. I think in a lot of ways, these two teams are very similar. They're very similar in my opinion. When I look at this game, I kind of lean towards Texas to a degree, but barely. I mean, it's hard. Like, I've thought a lot about this game, and I feel like Texas may win this game. And I think it may just come down to what little experience Arch already has. And being in college now, this is going to be his, third year in college. So I'm excited to see, between these two teams, what position groups and what areas of each team really develops and becomes the spearhead of the offense or the defense, into pushing these teams along through the season while these quarterbacks kind of find themselves. I'm excited for this game. I think Texas pulls it out barely, but we're gonna see. We're gonna see Saturday at noon. Now that we've really gone through, the biggest games of this week, I really want to look at some new faces, some new quarterback faces that we're gonna see this year, and really these are kind of the guys that we're gonna see for the next 2, 3, 4 years. That's gonna really be the next group of stars in college, and these guys are coming out with a bang. These guys are gonna be starters. These guys are going to be potential stars. These are all potential future, first round draft picks at quarterback. So, I mean, these are some younger guys, some inexperienced guys that are now, have been given the reins, so some of the best teams in the country. So, I'm excited to take a look and see what these guys are going to be like, as a guy that, I don't really follow recruiting super close, but I'm generally aware of, of a lot of, top players, and seeing these guys, coming in, and now some of them have sat, some of them have played. We've seen some come in reserve. We've seen some of them thrusted into action in the middle of games. I think seeing these quarterbacks emerge and develop is going to be very, very interesting because all these quarterbacks are going to be in the height of discussion when it comes to the best teams in the country as well. Um, First off, we got Bryce Underwood, true freshman, just came out of high school, was named the starter at Michigan, 5-star quarterback, number one overall player in this year's recruiting class. So a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure. I'm excited to see what he can do for Michigan because I think that's the one thing that's really kept Michigan where they've been. They've kind of been on the fringe, even though they just won a national championship 2 years ago. I think it kind of keeps them on the fringe because they're not a quarterback driven team like most of the great teams are. They're led by having great defenses and, dominant running games and more of a manager at quarterback. So I'm excited to see if he can really change the narrative and have Michigan looked at as a destination for great quarterback play, and not necessarily for Michigan to change their identity to be a pass first team, but to be able to be a drop back passing team if they need to, because I think that's what really can propel them to being year in and year out amongst the top 5, 6 in the country every single year. Um, I'm excited to see what he's going to be as a freshman. He's not sat. He's not redshirted. He was straight out of high school, and he's about to step in. They're throwing him to the Sharks. I'm excited to see where they're really gonna where he's gonna take this team. Um, the next guy I want to look at is, it's kind of a personal thing for me. Gunnar Stockton, the new starter of Georgia, that we kind of saw last year a little bit. 4-star quarterback. He was the number 5th overall quarterback in the 22 class. So he's been at Georgia for a little bit. He's not inexperienced, but he doesn't have game experience necessarily. Everyone, saw him get thrusted into that SEC championship against Texas, take that major hit, but he really led them in the second half to really go and win that football game. For me, it's a little different looking at it because, I seen that kid, when he was this tall. I also played at Raven, and so I was coached by his dad, and so I saw him as a ball boy. He was our ball boy, whenever I played. So seeing him now, like seeing him grown up and seeing him at such a big stage, it's kind of on a two-way street because I'm a Georgia fan, but I'm a Raven guy and I'm a Gunner guy. So I really want to see what he's going to do. I hope the best for him. I'm excited to see what Georgia's going to be because I've over the last handful of years, we've seen the transition of quarterbacks at Georgia, and we went from the Stetson Bennett era, then we went to Carson Beck, and now I feel like I don't really know what we're going to be offensively at Georgia. In my opinion, just my gut tells me, because Carson Beck was the drop back passer that he was, the arm that he had, the talent that he had throwing the football, it kind of led them to be more of a pass heavy football team, which is un-Georgia in the Kirby Smart era. I think they kind of get back to being more of a ground and pound football team. I think that Kirby wants to run the football. I think that now having Gunner, who is a running quarterback, who, he can move, he can take some hits. Obviously no one wants to see him take too many hits. But I think the offense kind of shifts to a degree to less of a drop back passing game. And I want to see a little bit more, let's run the football, maybe even do some more zone read stuff that you didn't really do with Carson Beck. I really am excited to see the evolution of Georgia's offense with Gunner. I think he's really, really talented. He's a big kid. He's like 6'2", about 225. He's a big kid. He can take hits. but I'm excited to see the arm talent that he has, and I'm excited to see how far he can take them. Because in my opinion, it's kind of like a Alabama situation. I think that Gunner's going to be the key on really how far they can go, but I think the running game is going to be what helps him the most in developing, but also helping their offense be balanced to be able to play in tough, low scoring games or in higher scoring games where they need to control the clock. They need to keep their defense off the field. I'm excited to see what Gunner's going to be. I think Georgia's going to be really good this year. I'm excited to see what Gunner's going to be able to do for Georgia. Next, let's take a look at Dante Moore at Oregon. Dante Moore is he's been in college for a couple years. But he's a former five-star quarterback. He was the number 2 overall quarterback in the 2023 class. Originally committed and played at UCLA for Chip Kelly. He actually started 5 games. I watched, I want to say 3 or 4 of those games. But he started 5 games. He went 3-2 at UCLA. Had very much up and down. It was a lot of down, honestly. I think part of it is looking at the fact that, I mean, he was playing at UCLA. The talent there's not the same as you're going to get at a lot of these other schools. It's just not. And throwing, he was a true freshman, throwing a true freshman on that football team, playing in a Power Five conference at the time. I'm not sure necessarily what he's going to be, because the only thing I've really seen from him has not been the greatest. Now, I kind of take it with a grain of salt just because of the situation and how young he was. But I'm excited to see what he's going to be. He transferred to Oregon 2 years ago. He backed up Dylan Gabriel last year, so he's behind a really good quarterback, and he's probably learned a lot. And also, Oregon has a trend of the last handful of quarterbacks to produce very efficient quarterback play, not just statistically great, as in massive numbers, but they've had some of the most efficient quarterbacks in the country of all time. So I'm excited to see what they do with his talent. He's extremely talented, and I want to see what Dan Lanning and this crew is really going to be able to do, because again, he's young and he's going to be the starter for one of the best teams in the country. So he's going to be part of, and maybe the main part of, what they're really going to do this year. A lot of these wins and losses are going to, be put on Dante Moore, because he is the quarterback, and quarterback's the most important position. So I'm really excited to see him play. I think Oregon's going to be pretty good. I do have questions on how good they're going to be with him. I'm not sure what to expect with Dante Moore on the high end. So I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see what they're going to be. I think they're going to be pretty good, but I have questions. Um, Next, looking at a guy who I'm actually really intrigued with. I'm extremely intrigued with this guy. Texas A&M quarterback Marcel Reed, extremely talented, extremely talented. Former 4-star. He was the 4th overall quarterback in the 23 class. Last year, we saw him get a decent amount of play. He was the backup in the beginning, and then he got the start nod, and he ended up starting 7 games last year. Was 4-3. I think his potential and upside is extremely high. I'm excited to see his development from last year to this year. He's got wheels. I mean, that's the first thing that jumps off the page, is the dude has got crazy wheels. Like, he can move. I want to see him develop in the pocket. I think his overall development is going to be a big part of what pushes Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M is going to be a top 10 team in the country at the end of the day. I think they get into the playoff. I think Marcel Reed is going to have a really good year. I think he's going to be a sneaky, Heisman candidate potentially. I just something about him and this football team. I think this team may end up pushing into the playoff and him having a very good year. I'm really excited to see him play, and I'm excited to see him next year where he develops even further. So his potential, I think the big thing with him, actually on my notes, I've got potential in all bold. I think the potential for him is extremely high for what I see. When I see him play, I'm like, this dude is super unrefined and he's raw. I want to see when they stop knocking the big chunks off and they start sanding him smooth. I'm excited to see the level of potential that he's going to be able to blossom into being a really good quarterback. I think he's going to push Texas A&M to be a really, really good football team. Next we have Julian Sayin at Ohio State. As we kind of talked a little bit about earlier. Highly talented and highly touted recruit coming out of high school. This dude was a five-star quarterback, the number 2 overall quarterback in the country in the 24 class. Originally committed to Alabama, actually enrolled at Alabama, and in the latter part of 2023, I think during the bowl season, in preparation for bowl game, he was a scout teamer for Alabama. He actually practiced with Alabama. But once Nick Saban retired, he entered the transfer portal, went to Ohio State. Extremely, extremely talented player. I don't have questions on his skill, but something about him to me, I've not heard the same buzz that I've heard in years prior about quarterbacks at Ohio State. Now, that could just be that there's just not as many people talking about it. But I'm really interested to see what they're going to do with him. He was a freshman last year, or excuse me, he was not a freshman last year. He enrolled last year in the 23 season, rolled into the 24 season. So he was a redshirt freshman at Ohio State. So I'm not sure what he's gonna be. I'm to me he's very much just a wait and see. I'm just waiting to see how good he's gonna be. I don't have any doubts on how good he is. I'm waiting to see on how good he really is because I've just not heard the same things as I hear about other quarterbacks in the past with him. So it's like very interesting to see what he does. Now, my expectations for him, I expect him to be a really good quarterback, and I expect him to be developed really well. Ryan Day may be the best at developing quarterbacks and getting them ready to play and also play young. You know, a really good example is CJ Stroud. This he was a kid when he started, redshirt freshman, and gets thrown out there, and he kind of looked like a redshirt freshman in the very beginning. By the end of the season, the dude was balling. That's kind of what I expect Julian Sayin to be. I expect to see, a lot of the ripples and a lot of the hiccups and stuff early in the year, being a new starter, being young, playing the best. I think the second half of the year is really where you're going to see this football team thrive. And I think you're really going to see him thrive. So I'm excited to see what he's going to be. And last, obviously, the biggest name in all of college football this year, Arch Manning, obviously, former 5-star quarterback, number 3 overall quarterback in the class of 23. Obviously, we all know his family, the Mannings, Uncle Peyton, Uncle Eli, his dad Cooper, who a lot of people may not know was a really good wide receiver before he had an injury that basically injured his career. Goes to Texas. The word is, when is he going to start? When is Arch going to play? And he sat behind Quinn Ewers, was very patient. I'm glad he was patient. I'm glad he didn't enter the transfer portal like a lot of guys would. He sat, waited his turn, and now the reins are his. He sat 2 years behind Quinn Ewers, and we're gonna now it's time. We're finally gonna get to see what Quinn Ewers, or excuse me, not Quinn Ewers, but Arch Manning is gonna be. Um, right now he's the favorite to win the Heisman. And that's a lot. That is a lot for any quarterback, but especially for a guy that's he's never really played meaningful snaps. He's had a couple starts last year filling in for Quinn Ewers when he was injured. But I think the win-loss record of the teams he played was 7-17. So he didn't play against really good competition when he started. And he only plays, in reserve whenever Texas is just trying to, get out of there. So I'm excited to see what Arch is going to be. I think he's going to be pretty good. I think there's too much pressure being put on him. I don't think the pressure is going to get to him, but I'm not a huge fan of putting all of this pressure on him this young, this inexperienced. They're the favorite to win the national championship. He's the favorite to win the Heisman. Everyone's saying he's just going to run away with it. He's going to be this great quarterback and he's going to go to the league. They're already talking about him leaving Texas next year and going to the NFL. I'm like, we need to slow down and let the guy play some football games first. Let the guy play Michigan. Let him play Penn State. Let him play Oregon. Let him get his feet wet with legit college competition. So I'm waiting to see what he's going to be, and this whole list of quarterbacks, it's very much a wait and see. I'm excited to see what he's going to be. I think he's going to be good. I think Texas is going to be top 2, top 3 team in the country. I think they're going to be really good. I think Arch is going to be really good, but it's still a wait and see because he is unproven. No one really knows what he's going to be, but we do have high expectations for him. So I'm excited to see what he's going to be. So the last little segment I want to do is kind of just something quick, but this is just more of an opinionated thing of what I'm looking at when it comes to the season as a whole. As every year, we get certain teams that are either overrated, overranked, or just we expect them to be good and they're just not as good as we expect them to be. And then there's teams that kind of come out of nowhere or become better than what we kind of expect them to be. And I kind of want to look at some teams that I listed 3 teams for each, and I kind of want to just call this the was and will be segment. I've got 3 teams that I'm going to list as was and 3 teams I'm going to label as will be. And essentially what was is teams that were good, and mainly looking at last season or the last couple seasons, teams that I feel like that were good and had a presence, at the top of the sport. And I feel like those teams are going to come back down to earth, or they're going to drop lower than people expect. And then the will be is what I expect teams to emerge in the top end of the sport and kind of put their stamp on this season. My first team for the was category is SMU. SMU kind of was the will be team of one of the will be teams of last year. They kind of came out of nowhere, their first year in the ACC, and they go and they really pushed Clemson to their limit to a degree in an ACC championship. SMU still made the 12-team playoff, and I figured they ended up getting beat pretty handily and controlled against Penn State. So I think they're a team that's going to come back down to earth. I still think they're going to be a pretty good football team. I thought they were a really good football team last year. I just think that where they're at currently, I think people have really high hopes for them, and I think they're going to come back down to earth a little bit. I don't think they're going to be the team of last year. So my next team is Indiana, kind of the same thing, but the difference with Indiana is that Indiana lost, they lost their quarterback. They lost a lot of players that made that team what that team was. I kind of think they were a kind of a one-hit wonder. I expect Indiana, in my opinion, potentially move out of the top 25 this year. I don't think they're going to be the same team as they were last year. And we're going to see some new teams kind of replace them. I don't see Indiana being as good as they were last year. So I think they're dropping. And kind of probably the biggest name I think on this list that may be the most surprising is I actually think Alabama um, falls a little. I think that last year was the transition year for Alabama. 9-4. I felt like Bama last year was better than the 9-4 record that they had, but I think that Alabama this year has to redefine their identity because I don't think the quarterback play is going to be the same. I look at Alabama and I see they're replacing Jalen Milroe, and now they got a guy that's not Jalen Milroe. You know, Ty Simpson is going to be more of a pocket quarterback, in my opinion. So I think it also makes them have to redefine what their offense is going to be. And I'm just not sure on what he's going to be at quarterback. And I think at the end of the day, he's that system at Alabama with Kalen DeBoer is quarterback first. It just is. And I'm just not sure what they're really going to be. I think defensively, Alabama's going to be pretty good. I think they have skilled players as they always do, but I think quarterback play is going to really be what kind of pulls them back to a degree. I'm not overly high on Ty Simpson. That's just what I see. Um, I think that I don't think that they fall below bowl eligible. I don't think that they're going to collapse. I just don't think that they're going to rebound and be this 10-2, 11-1 SEC championship. We're going to bust in the playoff and win games and contend for a national championship. I just don't think. I think that this year is going to be record wise, maybe the same as what it was last year. I could see a 10-3 or 9-4 season, but to their standard, that's also another step back, in my opinion. So that's why I put them in the will be or in the was category. I look at three more teams that I've got in the will be category. These are teams that I think are going to they're going to emerge. I've got one team that I think is going to kind of not come out of nowhere, but I think it's going to be a team that's going to be better than people expect and are going to be ranked higher than people expect. I think there's another team that has great potential, but just hasn't capitalized on that potential. But I think this year they may begin to really capitalize on their potential. And I think there's one team that's been kind of flatlined or dormant the last couple years where they've been. And I think now is the year that they really, really jump and come back into the forefront of the sport. Number one, Iowa State. I think Iowa State, as we saw this past weekend against Kansas State, really good football game. It took them a half to get going, but I really think Iowa State is going to be a good football team. In my playoff prediction, I've actually got Iowa State winning the Big 12. Actually, I got them beating Texas Tech in the Big 12 and getting a top 10 spot in the playoff. I think Iowa State's going to be good. They've got a decent amount of returning production, and they got a returning quarterback, Rocco Beck. I think they're going to be good, and I'm excited to see them. They're going to be a team that I really, really pay a lot of attention to. I think they're going to be what last year's Arizona State was. I think what they're going to end up being. I think they're going to end up being a really good football team. Next we got on the will be list, I think Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M is going to be an extremely good football team. I feel like over the last 3 or 4 years, Texas A&M has been this team that everyone looks at as really talented, tons of money, transfer portal, and I think really the brand of Texas A&M has relied on the Johnny Manziel era to kind of carry them as in their name brand. And I think that has kind of worn off just because of the amount of time it's been since that era. And now they've kind of hit an era of now they're this extremely talented football team that seems to always come up short in big games. They never can get over the hump. They never can beat the best. And I think this year is a year that doesn't really change that narrative, but I think this is the beginning of it may changing it in future years. Texas A&M is going to be really good in my opinion. I've got them as a top 10 football team at the end of the day going into the playoff. I think I had them ranked ninth. I think they're going to be a really really good football team. Like really good quarterback play. I think it's going to end up pushing their offense over the hump because I really think it's their offense that's really held them back. I'm really excited to see what Texas A&M is going to be. Just I'm excited to see Marcel Reed and how far this offense goes because I think if Marcel Reed plays well, I think this team can beat a lot of good football teams. So I've got them up there in like the top 10 by the end of the day. So Texas A&M is going to be a team that kind of pushes their way into the forefront of the country, and they could be a team that's hot by the end of the year. So I'm excited to see that. And my last team on the will be list, I think, is not really a surprise, but I've got them on the list because I think of at the level that they're going to be. And I think it's Clemson. I think Clemson, post Trevor Lawrence era, has kind of been dormant. As we've seen the landscape of the sport change, everybody's, in the portal now. Everyone's, building their team to the portal. It used to be, years ago before the portal, you built through recruiting, but there were years that you just had a down year because the year to year recruiting kind of dipped, in a certain class where you were deficient in different areas, or maybe you just weren't as good. Maybe that class just wasn't as good. And now I think because everyone kind of can plug and play now because of the portal, Clemson hasn't really done that. Clemson has stayed, true to their guns. Dabo has really stayed true to his guns of building Clemson with Clemson guys. And I think Clemson last year kind of showed what they were. They got beat by Georgia in a not so great game, and it kind of labeled them as Dabo on the hot seat. Is Clemson done? And I just think they just got better and better and better as the season went on. And by the end of the season, Clemson to me was showing as one of the best teams in the country. I actually expected them to go play Texas in a really close game, and it's exactly what happened. Um, and this year, I expect them to play for a national championship. And right now, just off the top of my head, I think they probably win the national championship. I think they have a ton of production coming back. They're very experienced, especially on defense, and they're bringing back a quarterback that, in my opinion, may be the best quarterback in the country. So I'm really, really excited to see what Clemson's going to be. I'm excited to see where Clemson goes. Um, I can't wait to see them play the best of the best. And, we're going to see a Saturday night when they play LSU. That's going to tell me a lot about this football team. I really expect Clemson to be among the top 2, 3, 4 in the country at the end of the day. So that's really what I'm looking at. So guys, that's pretty much it. That's just a nice preview of this weekend's games. I'm excited about this season. I'm excited to get this season kicked off in a matter of days. These are some really good games this weekend. I know where I'm going to be. I'm going to be at home watching football, and hopefully, our next episode we're going to be reviewing some of these games and how these games went, and then we'll start jumping into some NFL stuff because the NFL's coming up quick. So I'm I'm really excited about these games here and excited about the season, coming forward. So it's good getting on here and just talking some ball, man. So see you next time.